Linda Petticrew is one determined woman. She's worked hard and many long hours to build a stunning career as a professional executive assistant, and she's worked for some of the top CEOs in the city. But her real strength and tenacity was when she faced breast cancer. Not once, but twice. Diagnosed at a young age, she fought and won her battle, and then 20 years later had to fight it again. During this episode, Linda talks about her experience, and she gets very candid about her treatment in the workplace and the amazing difference an employer can make in the life of someone dealing with treatment. When you subscribe to our show, you help us grow. Someone you know may need to hear this story, so please share with your family and friends. And consider supporting our mission. Your donation can help save the life of an uninsured woman. Let's talk about your breast. A different kind of podcast presented to you by The Rose, a breast center of excellence and a Texas treasure. You're going to hear frank discussions about tough topics, and you're going to learn why knowing about your breast could save your life. Linda, thank you so much for being with us today. I was just amazed at your story, and I know our listeners will be too. But I want you to start by telling us, you've been in the corporate world for ages.
Right.
Yes, so tell us what you do.
So I'm an executive assistant. I've worked close to 50 years, and I've had many different jobs with many different companies. I think some of my favorites are the seismic company I worked for, because it was international. I got to travel with them overseas. And now I work for an oil and gas company, and I love it there. And they treat their employees excellent, great benefits, great people to work with, very diverse, and they treat everybody really good, which I love.
And, one thing I've learned is that I, for years, never had anyone to back me up. I never had an executive assistant. Oh, my gosh. You run the world. I mean, you know that. No one gets past mine. I'm sure no one gets past yours. So,
right. Yep.
Yeah.
The chairman of the company that I worked for with that seismic company, his wife gave me a little figurine, and it said, back then that we were called secretaries. Secretaries rule the world.
Oh, definitely.
So, yeah.
I don't think anything has changed in that. So let's go back to when you were first diagnosed with breast cancer, and tell us how old you were, what was going on in your world.
So I was 34 years old. I just had my first child, a boy, and the breastfeeding didn't go so well. It was I had to breast and bottle feed, and it took forever. It's just daunting. So I stopped breastfeeding, which I'm so thankful now I did, and my breasts, went down in size because they were so big when I was pregnant. And when they went down, I could feel the lump was I want to say this big. It was like 3, it was large. I could feel it. And so I immediately went and called my OBGYN and went in for a mammogram. And I remember that weekend because I'd just gone in for a mammogram. It was my 10th anniversary weekend and my sister's 30th birthday. And my parents had planned a party for us both. And we didn't tell anybody that weekend. And then Monday we had an appointment with the surgeon, and he told me immediately, he could tell that it was breast cancer because it had the jagged edges. He said if it wasn't breast cancer, the edges would be, the circle would be sharp edges. But this was jagged. And you could see it had spread to one of my lymph nodes already. Oh. So that meant it spread. So that was very scary. So he scheduled me for a mastectomy on Friday, and this was Monday night. He saw me after, like at 6 o'clock at night. And so my husband at the time sold high-end cars, and he had a lot of doctor customers. So he started calling his customers to check out this surgeon because we didn't know him, and he wanted to check him out. And he talked to one of his doctor customers he was very close to. And this guy said he didn't know him, but, that didn't mean he wasn't any good. And my husband was really close. He said, well, what would you do if it was your wife? He said, well, I would have her at MD Anderson or Sloan Kettering in New York. And my husband goes, okay, well, how do we do that? Because back in 1990, it took forever to get into MD Anderson. It's not like it is today where you can just call and get yourself an appointment.
Right.
So he said, well, my friend runs MD Anderson, the doctor said. He said, let me give him a call. So I was there in 2 days.
Wow.
My first appointment was in 2 days, and then 8 days later, I started my first chemo. So I was there almost every day, and the doctor, they did a needle aspiration biopsy, which the surgeon told me that he didn't do those because it would spread the cancer. Well, he wasn't an oncologist and he didn't know, because at MD Anderson they told me no. You could take a bite out of a cancerous tumor and it would not spread. So they did the needle aspiration, and they found out what we already knew, and so they started me with chemo right away. So within 8 days, I had my first round of chemo because I wanted to see how the chemo reacted to on the tumor. And after the first and the second round, you could tell it started to shrink.
Oh.
So I had 4 rounds of chemo, and then the week after, I remember that year, Thanksgiving, I went in and had back then they just did a lumpectomy. They didn't do the mastectomies as often. So they did a lumpectomy and they removed all my lymph nodes. And it was all clear. So the chemo had killed the cancer, and it wasn't there. It was all the tissue was clear that they took out. So, and then I had to do 5 more rounds of chemo and then 6 weeks of radiation. So it was about a year of treatment.
Yeah.
And I, like I said, I had a new baby. But I think he helped me. And when I talk about him, I always tear up. But he helped me get through it.
In what way?
I couldn't worry about myself. I was a new mom. I had to take care of him. I had a great support system. My mother and my mother-in-law helped me take care of him because my husband worked too. So when I was going through chemo, I would work 3 weeks out of the month, and then the week I had chemo, I would take off. But they still helped me every day with him because I had to take him at a daycare. He couldn't go to daycare because if he was in daycare and got sick, then he could get me sick. And we did have 1 week where my mom had to go out of town, and so the daycare where I had him in took him for that week. And they were so nice about it. But he got sick. He got me sick, which landed me in the hospital for 5 days.
Oh, my.
Now, I wasn't sick those 5 days. I mean, after giving me medicine, after 1 day, I felt great, but they wouldn't let me out until my blood level got to I remember, to 1,000. Yeah. And it took 5 days for it to get there. Yeah. So I just had to, sit in the hospital. And anyway, but I told the doctors at MD Anderson that they told me they didn't know if I could have any more children. And I said, well, if I can, I can, but I have to be here for my one. He needs a mother, so I just need to be here for him. And I have to tell you, I kept a positive attitude always, which I think helped. And I just, dying was not an option. So I never thought about that. I knew I was going to be okay.
That is amazing, because that's...
Which might have been, naive, but that's how I got through it, I think. I was going to be okay. I'll get through,
But Linda, you just went right over, here you are, 34 years old, a very young woman with a brand new baby, and you go to the doctor and all of a sudden you're facing mastectomy. I mean, that had to be a huge jolt.
Right.
I can't imagine wondering if this is going to be what you're going to have to do, and then to go into a whole different area that actually you didn't have it. You had a lumpectomy and you had chemo.
Right.
But You had to be on a roller coaster of emotions during that time.
I was, and my husband, I have to tell you, I have to give him lots of credit. He helped me. He was there. You know, he took me to all my chemo treatments. He was there for all the appointments, and you know, he was my rock. He had to change back then. My catheter. Now they put it underneath the skin. Mm-hmm. Back then they didn't, so he had to change, you know, the dressing once a week. And so we had a system where we would do it at 10 o'clock while the news was on, and we knew my son Garrett, who was a baby then, he'd be well asleep, and usually between 10:30. He never woke up at that time. So we knew, because once you start the process, you have to finish it. Mm-hmm. So we had a system, and
he certainly learned a lot during that time.
And he was great. Mm. He was there for me the whole way. And
was he worried about you?
He never said, but I think he was. And I years later, some of my friends told me how scared they were. I had one girlfriend who one Sunday she actually cut my hair off. Because, you know, it started I was on the adriamycin, and it started falling out. And I didn't want it to get on everywhere and get on Garrett, and it was falling out in the shower. So I just said, just cut it off. And so she cut it real short. And then the following week when I was at MD Anderson, I went down. They have a beauty shop, and I had them shave my head.
What was your reaction when you first saw yourself?
Well, I had a pretty good shaped head, you know, so that was okay. And I had a wig, but I didn't really like it. It wasn't comfortable. Mm-hmm. So I learned how to tie scarves, and I would use 2 scarves. I would use one for the base, and then I would roll one and make like a kind of like a headband over it. And then in the back, you would roll it and it looked like a bun. And I remember one day, you know, back then it was Foley's. I went into Foley's, and I was in the makeup department to get something. And a lady looked at me, and she said, it was raining that day. She said, that's a great way to wear your hair on a day like today.
Oh,
I mean,
my.
She had no idea. But I mostly wore what I call the turbans.
Yeah.
And, I got scarves. I'm a match person, so I always have to match. So I got scarves. I had scarves for every outfit.
Well, and so many women talk about many times the wigs are just not comfortable. No matter how expensive or
right.
how fancy they are, it's just you're very sensitive, during that time.
And back then, I didn't think, at least the one I got, it didn't really look good. It didn't look real to me. So I thought the turbans were better. And now it's funny now, the other day when I washed my hair, I put my hair in like a wrap and it start drying. And my husband the other day told me, she said, I really hate seeing you in that. And I said, what? Why? And he said, because it reminds me back when you didn't have hair. I went, oh.
How sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now you went through a year or so of treatment, and fast forward.
Yep.
How many years later, when you had a lot of surveillance during that time, right?
Yes, I was. Well, first you start with 6 months and then a year. I never ever. In the 31 years I was going there, I never, and still going there, I never was longer than a year. So yearly appointments. My doctor then started telling me about the gene testing. Mm-hmm. My sister developed breast cancer 10 years after me, and she's 5 years younger. So, like I told you, that I found mine about when she was 30. She had it when she was 40. And so at that time, she had a double mastectomy, because then they were doing more of that. And her doctor, too, was telling her about the gene testing. So she actually she went and got it done first. And,
so both of y'all were very young.
Yes. So she was, I was 34, she was 40.
Had she had children?
Yes, she'd had She had two. She has two, but she had two. So she had toddlers then. She had small children then at 40. Now, they were probably older than toddlers, but they were small, But she had already had her children by then, and her doctor too was talking to her about the gene testing. So she got tested first, found out it was BRCA1, which is the breast cancer, ovarian cancer. And then I got tested, and I tested positive also.
For BRCA1.
BRCA1, yep, same thing. And so my doctor at MD Anderson told me that I should have, double mastectomy. And, but when you don't have cancer, that's a big surgery. So I just, but he kept me on 6 months. I went every 6 months. So one time I would have a breast mammogram, and then 6 months later they would do a breast MRI. And he never stopped. It was always, because I was the BRCA1 positive, he kept me on 6 months. Now, my sister, she had a doctor that had a lot of patients that had died of ovarian cancer. So he encouraged her to get a hysterectomy. And then after she got hers, she started calling me and telling, her doctor kept saying, "You got push your sister, she's got to get one. I've lost so many patients, I don't want to hear about another one." So I went ahead and had the hysterectomy. And the doctor that did my surgery, she found precancerous cells in my fallopian tubes. And she had 8 patients after me that had the same thing.
Oh, my gosh.
So I'm thinking that's probably where it starts, and then it moves down to your ovaries. And I know, I think now that now they just remove your fallopian tubes, I think. Don't quote me, but I think, somebody's told me that. And they were going to, with my hysterectomy, they were going to leave, something. They asked me about one was it I think it was your uterus. They were going to leave that in. I said no. Because my father's mother died of uterine cancer. So I said, no, I don't want to have that chance.
No, wow.
Do I need it? No.
Yeah.
Take it out.
Yeah.
So
you'd already had another child at this point.
I had. So I was, yep. So, even though they told me I might not, I could never go on birth control again. So we just left it in God's hands. And, if it was meant to be, it would be, I always thought. And we wanted a second child because I never wanted my kids to, only have, to after we were gone, not to have anybody. So, we were blessed with a little girl 3 years after my son, 3 months after my son was born. So it was, a couple years after I had been on the chemo. So, and she was healthy.
And so during an MRI exam, was that when they found the second cancer?
It is, and it was very small. And then they wanted to do the needle aspiration biopsy. And they actually had to do it twice because the first time they had really trouble. They had to do it while they were doing an MRI because that's the only way they could see it. It was so small. Right. And they had really trouble getting to it. So the first crew couldn't get it. And so I came back a couple days later. They did another one, and it was positive, but it was very early. So, which I'm so thankful for because the second time I went ahead and did the double mastectomy and reconstruction. I was able to. They took my tummy fat, which I had plenty of, and built my new breasts with that. And so I was able to do it all in one surgery, which was
it's
nice.
a long surgery.
It was.
Yes.
It was 12 hours.
Yes.
And I think my doctor said why she thought it took a little longer because I had radiation to my left side, and those blood vessels in there, she said, were a little harder to, I think, reattach or something to. So that way it took a little longer, but they did a great job. And
did you feel differently the second time? Were you as concerned, more concerned, not as concerned?
Well, they saved me once, twice, because I feel like they saved me when I had my hysterectomy too. So they saved me twice, and we caught it so early. So that to me was a huge. And
No matter what, it's still cancer.
I know. So I couldn't go there. So I guess I don't let myself think that way.
Yeah.
So no,
That's a huge message
Yeah.
for our listeners. Sometimes you just can't go there.
Right.
You can't think about
and,
it.
and you just have to keep a positive attitude. Something in your life's got to be positive. You got to pull something positive, because I think that's what really helped me. Is of course my family, my friends, and to stay positive.
And you had quite a period in there where you were cancer-free.
Yep.
And yet, here you were again with a hysterectomy, potential cancer, a second diagnosis. Did cancer ever define you as a person?
Well, I was always afraid of it coming back. Before I had the second, that's always in the back of your mind. So when you have your checkup, at least for a while, you feel the relief. Okay, I'm fine now. I'm still cancer free. No, I don't think I let it define me.
And when and this is something that a lot of women will not postpone, but having those mammograms and MRIs are hard. I mean, you spend some time thinking, I hope nothing comes up.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And did you find yourself ever having like anxiety attacks or? Oh, really?
Oh yeah. You until you get the results. Yeah. You're scared. I
Like
was
3
scared
days
every
or 2
time.
days
In
or-
the back
yeah.
of my mind. Now I might not have told anybody around me, because then like if I told my husband, then he would be scared. He might be scared too, and I didn't want. But yeah, it's always in the back of your mind, always, which is awful. So you kind of just push it away. Like, let's not think that way. Let's stay positive. It'll make you feel better.
Still hard
It is.
to
It
control
is.
your mind and your emotions at
Right.
the same time.
Yeah.
Yes.
It definitely is.
What changed in your life? Did you find yourself having different priorities? You were still very active in work. You were still a career woman.
Right. Yeah. But it's my family. I just, I got to be there for my family. Because I, wished for one day I'd have grandkids, which I have one now, and about to have a second one. So I wanted to see where my kids would go in life, and I wanted to be there for them. I'd be there for my whole family, for my parents as they aged. So I just, I always thought about it, but I just pushed it away. I think I just pushed it away. Because I didn't want to have those thoughts.
So your second child was a girl. And were you particularly concerned about her having inherited?
Oh yes, and then you have some guilt because I gave it to her. Of course, I know it wasn't my fault that I have it, but you still think, oh gosh, I gave it to her. So I always prayed that there's a 50-50 chance. I always prayed that she wouldn't have it. And now I'm going to have a granddaughter soon, and I already started praying that it skips her.
Yeah. So what is your wish for your granddaughter in her lifetime? What do you hope for her?
Well, first, that she doesn't have the gene. I know if she doesn't, there's still a chance that she could, develop breast cancer later in life. Because I have many friends that have had breast cancer that don't have the gene.
Don't have the gene, that's true.
And I just hope she can live a happy, healthy life. I pray that, maybe in her life, I know it's not going to happen in my lifetime, but maybe in my daughter or my granddaughter's lifetime, they'll find a cure or find somehow to that there won't be any more cancer or breast cancer.
Oh, that's a wish we all have. We would love for that to happen. Well, so now we're going to have a chance to interview your daughter because she had to make some tough decisions, too, in her early childhood, her early womanhood.
Right.
Yes, and I so appreciate you sharing your story because, it's tough to share some of these things, and you've certainly had the whole gamut, especially being such a young woman with it. So thank you, Linda, for being with us today. And we look forward to interviewing you again with your daughter, Rachel.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today on Let's Talk About Your Breasts. This podcast is produced by Speak Podcasting and brought to you by The Rose. Visit therose.org to learn more about our organization. Subscribe to our podcast, share episodes with friends, and join the conversation on social media using hashtag Let's Talk About Your Breasts. We welcome your feedback and suggestions. Consider supporting The Rose. Your gift can make the difference to a person in need. And remember, self-care is not selfish. It's essential.